Good evening. I'm calling the Monday, September 24th, 2018 Planning Commission meeting to order. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. First item on the agenda is the approval of tonight's agenda. Do I have any requests for changes? Entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
All right.
Second.
We have a move by Commissioner DeSanctis and a second by Commissioner Higgins. All those in favor of approving the agenda say aye.
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 All right. Agenda is approved. Next up are the minutes from the meeting held on Monday, September 10th, 2018. Do I have any requests for changes? No concerns? All right. Entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Freiberg makes a motion to approve. Do I have a second? And a second. Commissioner Kirk. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Moving on, we have a public hearing this evening. Aspire Eden Prairie 2040 Comprehensive Plan Update. A request to recommend approval to the City Council of the draft Aspire Eden Prairie 2040 Comprehensive Update. Julie, will you be speaking on behalf of the city?
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. As stated, this is a public hearing for the Aspire Comprehensive Plan Update. I want to thank you for your time this evening to begin going through the formal city review process through the public hearings at Planning Commission as well as City Council. And also in attendance this evening is John Houseel from Houseel Levine. He is representing the firm that has been working with the city in preparing this comprehensive plan update. So as a part of this overall process, as you know, it began probably about 2 years ago, and we've been working diligently on it ever since. So we're very happy to be in front of you with a more refined draft this evening after having multiple discussions over the course of the summer with you. So I do have a PowerPoint that John and I will be walking through, revisiting the overall process, and then discussing in a bit of detail more of the information that is included in each of the draft chapters before turning it back to you for any questions and opening the public hearing for comment by others.
Would you like us to reserve questions until the end then, or?
You can certainly interrupt. I'll appreciate a bit timing to take a breath.
Okay.
So.
All right. Thanks.
So as I mentioned, the city initiated the project roughly about 2 years ago, and as a part of that project initiation, it was clear that this time around the city wanted to pursue a very energetic and dynamic community engagement phase rather than kind of going through the old and tired just open house type of format that many communities have used for a long time. So as a part of that, the city initiated community engagement and stakeholder analysis that was really personalized to each of the topic areas within the plan, and also kind of dug a little bit deeper on specific issues that haven't necessarily been visited for a while or that the city knew were trending issues that would need to be addressed. So the variety of community engagement included not only creation of focus groups, inviting folks with particular interests to come in and share their thoughts and their vision for the city, but also using technology in a way that hasn't been used in the comp plan process before, as technology has gotten better over time. So there were interactive maps where residents could, or property owners could go in and identify areas of the community that they thought were great examples of development, or potential locations for public art, or an area where they might want to see a trail connection, those types of things. In addition, we also did quite a few outreaches to specific community organizations, whether that was the Noon Rotary Group or the Chamber Policy Committee or a church or at several of the school district locations. And as a part of that, we also offered a DIY meeting or a do-it-yourself. So essentially a kit that folks could take home to their book club, to their homeowners association, to their neighborhood, collect all of that information and ship it back to us. Essentially help us do that work and reach a broader audience. So all of that information, along with doing an existing conditions analysis of what is out in the field today, what are some trends that are in the marketplace, taking a look at past practices, policies, the strategic plan. We'll get into that in a future slide, but looking at all of those documents as well helped inform where is Eden Prairie today. Then after taking a look at housing, transportation, and a couple of special area studies, looking at those in detail as we'll talk more as we get through this farther into this presentation. All of that information has been folded together into the draft plan that has been provided to you and is available on the city's website for review and comment. So as we've talked about before, the organizational structure of Aspire is really lumped into two groups. The plan chapters are largely the required pieces that Met Council requires for submittal to their agency for review. And those are the more traditional topics such as land use, housing, transportation, community facilities, parks, and water, resources and infrastructure. Economic competitiveness is a new requirement this time around. Each of these chapters have varying levels of requirements for Met Council review, and the economic competitiveness chapter, as we get to that, you'll see that chapter doesn't have a lot of requirements in order to meet the minimums, but because Eden Prairie has such a robust and dynamic commercial and industrial base and is such an employment center, the city really put a lot of effort into that chapter in order to make it our own and be reflective of what our community needs are. The other piece of it that is a little bit more discretionary are the plan call-outs. So we know from working with the policymakers that social equity and diversity, community health, and sustainability are local priorities. Also, through the community engagement process, those were themes we heard from those folks that were partaking in the focus group analysis and conversations as well. So it is a common thread through the residents, through the policymakers, that those are local priorities. And we wanted to see those integrated into the plan throughout the document, because there might be something transportation related and we can make a connection back to community health or sustainability. Whereas if we created a separate chapter for each of those issues, it might not be as user-friendly or kind of connect all the dots for the reader of the comp plan. So that's why we really wanted to pepper it all the way through, so that it was just a constant reminder of things that we can be doing and are doing to meet goals related to those three specific areas. As I mentioned, the city and House Seal Levine spent a bit of time taking a look at other contributing plans and studies. So on this slide, you'll just see a snapshot of some of those pieces of information that really informed and influenced the direction of the overall plan. So as you can see, some of them are local. They're the Energy Action Plan, the housing study that the city undertook as a part of this. Of course, the Strategic Plan for Housing and Economic Development is something that is generated out of the city on a biannual basis, I believe, if I've got that correct. We also, as a city, also do business and quality of life surveys. So that is a consistent touchstone back to our residents and our corporate residents as to what their needs or questions are for the community. And then you'll see some of the plans that influence the drafting of Aspire were more regional in level. The Met Council plans, the Thrive 2040, those are regional plans that kind of set the tone for the overall metro region and where we want to head in the future, or frankly need to head. So as I mentioned, through our community outreach, there were priority issues and concerns that were identified. Some common themes that we heard were questions about how to accommodate demographic changes and social equity throughout the community. The city does have some forecasted employment, household, and population numbers that indicate the community will continue to grow. And as a largely developed community, how are we going to accommodate that growth? Where should it be? So taking a look at all of that through the comp plan update. And also, Eden Prairie, of course, has a very high image within the metro area, not only by its residents, but outside of the community as well. So we want to maintain that high sense of quality and esteemed image that we do have. And also, as I mentioned, the sustainability and environmental protection, again, is a priority throughout the ranks of folks commenting and participating in this overall comp plan update. The market and demographic overview that supports the Aspire plan includes population trends. Some of that is that the populations are getting older. People are staying in their homes longer. What does that mean for our community with regard to housing type, services, parks needs, all of those types of impacts? Also, increased diversity and median income levels remaining largely, for the most part, steady, looking forward at how to address those demographic changes. And then also looking at employment and commercial trends. As I mentioned earlier, Eden Prairie has a very robust economic community. So what can we do to maintain that position and further enhance it as the community undergoes changes? So that leads us into the Eden Prairie Tomorrow chapter. All of that previous information basically fed into the Eden Prairie Today chapter. Lets us know where we're at. The Eden Prairie Tomorrow chapter is more of a vision statement that tells us after Aspire 2040 is adopted and implemented, what can we expect to see? And through that vision statement, it is clear that it would be a maintained commitment to being an employment hub and providing a high quality of life for our residents that they've come to expect, continuing to be a desirable place to work and live while promoting sustainability and providing a viable and welcome community to all of our community members, regardless of their income or ethnicity or any other difference. And then also providing natural resources and preserving natural resources, and maintaining recreational amenities within the community. Then as we dive into each of the topical chapters, the first one that we really get into is the land use chapter. And that chapter guides individual properties for development type. So we've got, I'm going to guess, between 16 and 18 different land use categories that are provided on our land use map. Many of them are replication of what is already in the comprehensive plan, but some of them are some new categories. So those new categories that are proposed include a mixed use, a flex service, industrial flex tech, and eco-innovation. And you'll remember from our review a couple of weeks back, the mixed use is a designation that has been applied or is proposed to be applied to, I believe it's 4 different areas within the community where outside of the TOD or town center areas where we're likely to see a lot of mixed-use development, these are areas that are appropriate for mixed-use development that are either horizontally integrated or vertically integrated with a mix of uses. The flex service area is a category that is proposed to be applied to 2 areas of the city, one of them being the Martin Drive area that was subject to one of the special area studies, and the other is down at Pioneer and Pioneer Trail, where those properties were largely developed as older industrial, and now that some of those facilities are aging out, we're beginning to see a transition of uses. So the city wanted to kind of get ahead of that and be proactive as we see that transition happening, identifying for the development community what kind of uses we would like to see there rather than responding to whatever the market brings forward to us. And the industrial flex tech is a category that's largely applied up in the Golden Triangle area, again acknowledging that the industrial market is a bit different today than it was when those properties were developed and the need to be flexible with that. The eco-innovation is one that we're particularly excited about. It's the land use guiding that is proposed at Flying Cloud Landfill and taking a look at working with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, the PCA, who owns the landfill and is responsible for maintaining it. How can the city partner with them as owners in order to provide some sustainability and environmental improvement within the area, whether that be through alternative energy sources or some passive recreation opportunities and things of that sort. The land use chapter also consolidates some of the commercial categories. Right now, in the current comp plan, there's a kind of a very definitive breakdown. We've got regional commercial, neighborhood commercial, community commercial, and we find through some of those categories, there's really a lot of overlap. So it makes more sense to consolidate some of those and separate the kind of the larger areas from the smaller areas and address the more detailed issues through the zoning ordinance, implementation. So we've consolidated some of those. With the residential categories, we are proposing with Aspire to modify the density ranges that are allowed within those residential categories, largely to address the changing demographic needs and the housing product types that may be underrepresented that we have found through the housing study. So knowing that Eden Prairie is largely developed, there's only a handful of infill properties throughout the community where we could capture some of that increased density while being respectful of those existing neighborhoods that surround those infill properties. And that speaks to my next bullet point. And then the TOD, or transit-oriented development, when the city did the comp plan in 2008, the LRT alignment at that point was not finalized. So that comp plan spoke to TOD in a pretty high-level fashion. Now that we have the alignment is finalized and construction is imminent, we have identified through this plan specific properties that are guided for TOD. With that, as you'll recall, when the city adopted the TOD zoning ordinance, there was a lot of input that was provided by property owners within close proximity to the TOD stations. So as a part of the comp plan language, there are triggering events that are included for some of those specific properties. So for instance, if you take a look at the Liberty Plaza site or the UHG vacant parcel, those properties, while guided for TOD, there's additional text that supports, if developed under their current approval, that would not trigger a need for rezoning. But if that development plan were to be moved to the side and a new development plan came in, the city would be looking to implement the TOD and rezoning at that point. So it is cognizant of the desire to remain conforming and not just impose non-conforming situations on property owners. And then also taking a look at parcel-specific development, which is somewhat what I mentioned with regard to TOD, but in addition to that, the other example I think that is a prime one is the city has been working hard for quite some time to obtain or work with the development community to bring a full-service hotel with meeting space. That's been an issue that's been identified for quite some time. The city has invested in a study in order to support that. So through this comp plan process, we've identified, I believe it's 5 opportunity sites where the city thinks that would be a really good fit to see that type of full-service hotel with meeting space. The Housing and Residential Areas chapter provides an overview of the existing inventory of housing within the community. It talks about the affordability levels and product types that are represented or may be underrepresented in the community, and provides specific implementation strategies as to how to improve those situations. Life cycle housing is something that you will hear mentioned throughout the plan, because this, of course, the desire is to provide housing types that cover the broad spectrum so that folks can, as they transition out of one housing type, still remain within the community and take part in those community connections of place of worship, schools, neighborhood community, all of that. Now, a couple of weeks ago, staff was in front of the Planning Commission reviewing this chapter with you specifically, and we sought some very specific feedback with regard to inclusionary housing. That's a policy that city staff is continuing to work on, and we took the feedback that this body provided and shared it with the City Council at their work session on September 4th. And after hearing the feedback from staff as well as the Planning Commission, the City Council had many of the same comments comments that you folks did as a commission in wanting to promote flexibility. Let's continue to take a look at where it's appropriate in ownership and rental. Are there certain thresholds in which we would want to see that applied? So staff is continuing to work on drafting a inclusionary housing policy that staff expects to bring back to the City Council very likely yet in October. So in the Aspire document, you will see a commitment to the fact that the city will be pursuing a inclusionary housing policy, and it provides a bit of a framework of all of the items that will likely be addressed in it, but does not provide the specific details because we're continuing to work that out. The economic competitiveness chapter, as I said, the city took a very energetic approach to this because of the fact that we do have such a concentration of employment opportunities and commercial and industrial base within our community. So this chapter looks at what are those economic drivers in our community and what are the opportunity markets. Where can we continue to maintain our positive image? Where can we grow as the market changes? And it also goes on to identify development and growth strategies, specifically with regard to outreach, workforce development, connections to local and regional resources, through a variety of different things that may be available to support economic competitiveness within the community looking forward to 2040. And John will speak from here. John will speak to several of the other chapters as we continue to move through this.
All right, it's good to be here again this evening on Planning Commission. I recognize most of you from our working sessions with council over the last couple of years. So I'm just going to touch on a few of the chapters very quickly to get it out there. Transportation accessibility chapter, sort of the yin and yang of comprehensive planning is often land use and transportation. That's sort of at the heart and soul historically of how comprehensive plans are structured. If you recall, the city under separate RFP retained SRF Consulting to specifically do a transportation master plan. They've been working diligently with staff in several departments at the staff level to do that. We've been coordinating with SRF to make sure their recommendations dovetail with the rest of the comprehensive plan. So that's what we've been working on. So SRF is completing some finalized edits based on Met Council feedback, but I'll go over just a few of the key things with this. It really includes text and graphics regarding roadways, bicycling and walking, freight and aviation. We wanted to make sure that the transportation and accessibility plan wasn't thought of as just vehicular or motorized transportation mobility, but access and mobility for all modes of transportation, walking, biking, transit, freight, air, you name it. So with regard to the roadways, sort of clarifying proposed changes to collector streets and incorporating key recommendations from recent corridor studies. In between comprehensive plans and when they are done, typically a decade or so apart, cities, and you're no exception, do specific, more focused studies in the years in between. And then when the comprehensive plan is done, it's the time to fold in those other studies into the comprehensive plan. So SRF went back and looked at those more recent corridor studies that you've conducted, folding in those more specific recommendations into the comprehensive plan. Took a look at cycling and pedestrian planning as well, identifying key components of transportation, which is how it functions locally for Eden Prairie, but how it necessarily dovetails and plugs into a more regional wide system. And that goes true with both freight, vehicular transportation, as well as pedestrian and bicycle networking. A trail is only good if it connects to something as opposed to just dead ends somewhere. So that regional coordination is crucial with regard to your bike trail and your walking trail planning to make sure we go into that regional bicycle network. Freight, one of the key things that SRF is working on is mapping heavy commercial daily traffic counts to make sure that principal arterial and A minor classifications are delineated and planned for accordingly. This is the type of traffic you want to keep out of residential and lighter commercial areas. It's not conducive to those other ones. And then aviation, we wanted to make sure that we were noting specific airport boundaries and land access locations in the areas surrounding the airport as it exists right now. The next is community facilities, and the best way to think about community facilities is a lot of people think when they talk about land planning, it's restaurants and houses and things like this, but a key part of a community's quality of life is its public facilities, its schools, its libraries, its public and quasi-public facilities. That really contributes to the quality of living in a place, not just the types of restaurants or shops or businesses you have there. So we took a look closely at police, fire, schools, library, heritage sites, and other public or quasi-public institutions or holdings within the city. It focuses on ensuring primarily that everybody is served well by these public facilities. And as your population begins to diversify, both in terms of background, age, and everything else, that every member of the community is equally accessed and served by the community facilities that the city provides. And it's an abundant list of community facilities. So we really want to make sure that that access and service level is there for everybody. And then key recommendations are to continue to prioritize, protect, and identify those heritage sites. Throughout all of our meetings with City Council and the focus groups and other residents and stakeholders was the importance of the heritage and history of the area and recognize the importance of the sites that you do have so designated already to not to lose the significance of those going forward as other areas develop. So this section really begins to zero in on those. And if I miss anything, Julie, jump in. Parks and open space, I would say few communities we've worked on are more defined by their environmental features and parks. It really is a defining characteristic of Eden Prairie, and it's really something to be proud of. And so a key part of this component of the plan was to begin to solidify and accentuate the parks and recreation amenities that you have, and to put in place a more robust connectivity system connecting all those to one another and a regional system through trails. So we really took a look at parks, open space, conservation areas, trails, and heritage sites. The goals were to ensure that all residents have access to well-maintained parks and protect critical natural resources. A lot of people think of parks as just those manicured areas where you can play a pickup game of baseball, but some of the more valued areas are those passive recreations where you might walk through, engage in nice water course, some wooded areas. Those are really crucial, and again, that defining characteristics of Eden Prairie. Key recommendations are to expand the local trail network to connect all of Eden Prairie's trails and the regional trail network. So you have an incredibly robust and rich natural resource community, and the idea is to make sure the system is in place to protect those and to better connect them for everybody. Those are the main things here. But again, like transportation, like community facilities, like parks and open space, there are other more detailed efforts the city undertakes on a regular basis. So our job with the comprehensive plan is not to replace a more detailed parks plan, but to make sure we are dovetailing it and they support one another at every step of the way. Again, water resources and infrastructure, again, the more delineated detailed analysis of this is not done at the comprehensive plan level, but at the folks for the city who do the water resource planning for the city. It is nuanced and it is detailed, and it has to be consistent with regional, local, and federal different regulations with regard to stormwater and floodplains, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot that goes into this at the city level. Right now, staff is completing some edits that we got back from Met Council and their ongoing review. And this includes additional text and tables addressing the city's sewer systems. So I won't go into this. Again, it's the comprehensive plan piece of this is to dovetail with other city efforts.
And then the city also, as a part of taking a look at what are local priorities, through the comprehensive plan process, the city elected to participate or conduct 2 special area studies, as I mentioned earlier in my comments. One of those was the Martin Drive area, just north of Highway 5, and the other is the Crosstown Industrial area, just south of Highway 62. So each of those areas was examined very thoroughly, taking a look at what are the uses that are out there today, what are some market trends that are occurring there that we can expect, and the reason for looking at those areas, as I mentioned earlier in the case of Martin Drive, was in order to best position the city as we see a transition of uses occurring over there. Some of those buildings are transitioning to, a dance studio or more retail in nature. We also have the Martin Blue apartment building that was constructed 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 6. So we see the introduction of some residential uses over there as well. So the city wants to be proactive and guide the development community as properties become available for development. In the case of the Crosstown Industrial area, that property, or that area rather, has remained largely the same for decades, and the city again wanted to be proactive in the event that a perfect storm happened, if you will, and redevelopment occurred at a higher level. What should that use be when it or what should that area be when it grows up? What can we do in the interim to help those businesses, succeed even beyond what they are currently functioning at? So as a part of that, there were proposals that are included in the special area study that address near-term improvements that could be made. In some cases, that's as simple as adding some screening, providing some pedestrian connections, and then also taking a look at long-term development scenarios as to how could that property develop, what is the best use, how should the buildings be located, what kind of massing is supported in that area. So there's a lot more detail as to what future expectations could be, so that when the time is right and calls start coming in, the city can share this information with the development community and say, this is what we're looking for. How can you help us get there? So that's largely what's covered in the special areas studies chapter. And then John will speak to the implementation chapter.
Right, so the implementation chapter, most comprehensive plans will have an implementation chapter at the end, and it's really, when you adopt a comprehensive plan, it's not the end of the planning process, it's really sort of the beginning of ramping up a lot of more smaller initiatives. This is a 240-page document that is, yeah, I know, I raised my eyebrows as well, that is chock full with, I can't tell you how many specific recommendations. Some are policy, some are more CIP-oriented, some are but they're all very actionable. And the key part of the implementation chapter, what it does is it begins to provide, to direct actions. It'll help direct the actions of city staff. It will help the clear delineation with regard to policy changes over time. But the implementation chapter is meant to provide direction on how to begin picking off the recommendations of the comprehensive plan. It's a little bit daunting to say, okay, we have this thing, how do we go about implementing it? Well, that's tough. So you sort of have to do a menu approach where you say, here's a matrix of the things we ought to start doing. Here's who's sort of key lead in sort of getting these things done. And these are the specific items and tasks we can start picking off over the upcoming years. Some are more short term, some are longer term. A change to zoning could be done in a matter of a month or two at almost no cost, led by staff. A recommendation that is tied back to a key intersection improvement or new roadway alignment is going to obviously take many, many years. It's going to cost millions of dollars. It may very well involve the state DOT, different level of implementation, very, very important, but totally different type of implementation project. So what we've done in the implementation chapter is begin to set the table for the city to begin to implement incrementally the comprehensive plan over time. This isn't something that once adopted, you can go out and say, okay, we're going to do this next week. That's not how comprehensive planning works. So our job in this chapter is to go out there to provide that matrix of what are the actionable recommendations and how to be putting those recommendations into actionable steps. And that's what the implementation chapter does at the end of the document.
So this concludes the detailed information part of our presentation. I do want to wrap up by kind of overviewing the process moving forward. So the Aspire plan has been in draft form out for public review and comment since the end of May. It is available on the city's website for the general public to review and comment on, and we do have, I believe it's between 500 and 600 people who have subscribed to our website to follow that and get updates, so we know folks are aware that it's out there. In addition, we're required to send it out to all affected jurisdictions. Now, those might be adjacent communities, watershed districts, school districts, and all of those folks have an opportunity to review and get those comments. Those comments are starting to trickle in as well. So this is truly a draft document that is subject to change, not only based on some of the information that is shared here tonight, but based on comments that are received through the public review process as well as the comment period. The Metropolitan Council, with this round of comp plan updates, has offered a new level of review to cities. Historically, cities went through the process, drafted their comp plan, worked it through locally, and then submitted it to the Met Council and crossed their fingers. This time around, the Met Council is allowing the communities to submit the draft plan for preliminary review, and then they're getting comments back to the city. So Eden Prairie submitted ours back in June, and we did receive comment back from them, I believe, mid to late August. So some of the things that John spoke to in his comments with regard to the water resources chapter and the transportation chapter, where we're continuing to work through some of those edits in response to Met Council comments, making sure that what we send them by the end of the year reflects what they want to see from us and answers all of their questions. So we're continuing to do that at this point, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
So just a question off the bat. So city council will approve it and then it'll be official? by the end of the year?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, in the event that the Planning Commission recommends approval to the City Council, we will take the plan forward then to the City Council for public hearing as well. They will approve it in draft form. We'll continue to work through any refinements that might come out of that conversation. And then once we're satisfied at a staff level that all of those issues identified by Met Council and other agencies have been addressed, we'll submit it to the Met Council for their review. We have to submit to the Met Council by December 31st of this year. And then the Met Council has 90 to 160 days, I believe, in order to provide a response or an approval back to the city, and then we'll bring that back to our City Council for formal implementation.
So in that case, it wouldn't come back to the Planning Commission, it would just go back to City Council?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank staff and John, your company as well, for such a thorough and thoughtful document. It's comprehensive and straightforward. It's a thorough and easy. I want to say it's an easy read, but it's with the 200 and some odd pages. But I just thought it was a fantastic document.
Thank you, appreciate that.
So well done. I just have a few questions, a couple of easy ones right off the bat. In Chapter 3, Land Use, we're talking about, for people who didn't know what TOD stood for, you offer up a definition in there, and it talks about the half-mile radius around the stations, and there's even a supporting graphic where you draw a half-mile circle around the stations. But as part of the definition that's mentioned twice in here, it also talks about half-mile around the stations and transit corridors. And that phrase, "and transit corridors," isn't graphically depicted, nor is it further explained. And I thought for the casual user, they may wonder what happens along a transit corridor that receives special attention about the TOD district that's separate from the half mile around the station. Okay. Well, I don't know if we want to answer that now or later, but that's one of the things. Second thing is on the special area studies, we've gone into detail about those too. But the most frequent question I get is, gee, what's going to happen with the area around the Minnesota Vikings training camp that they vacated? And so that was kind of a missing piece that, for such a common question, it hadn't been addressed. And I know there's been a lot of internal discussion about that, but it seems to kind of just be left aside, and I thought that might have been a little hole in there. And my last comment has to do with Chapter 7, Community Facilities Plan chapter. If you read it straight through, it sounds all nice and cheery, and you get to the point of Eden Prairie schools. And I think we all know that there's declining enrollment, and there's a small phrase very much up front in the document about that. But it's a pretty heavy-handed paragraph that's written about the school board's findings in declining enrollment, triggering economic impact in a negative way and other factors. And it's just left hanging like that. So I went back 2 pages to the goals and strategies of the chapter, and there's no goal or strategy to address that big problem. And so as a casual user, I felt for a small family who wants to come to Eden Prairie, that's one of the very first and foremost things in their mind is the quality of the schools. And we've had an outstanding school district for years and years. And to drop this somewhat of a Debbie Downer paragraph on them without a strategy to map out the city's preparedness for all of the impacts of the declining enrollment, I thought was a real missing scope of work.
Okay. Do you want to address these as they go? So go ahead and take a shot, and I will as well.
Okay, sounds good. With regard to the TOD question and the transit corridor being depicted, that's certainly something we can take a look at and further enhance. Certainly, if you take a look at the land use map, you will see where that transit corridor is for the LRT, but there is not more detailed, certainly, with regard to Southwest Transit, because, of course, they have transit service provided within the city as well. So we can take a broader look at that. With regard to the Vikings or Winter Park site, there is specific discussion about that that, if not in the land use it's either in the land use and economic development, or one or the other, but there is specific conversation about the fact that that is one of the opportunity sites for hotel development, and the property is in this draft plan guided for office in order to support that type of use, and talks about in the event that a building is constructed on that property, how it should be oriented, what it should look like, things of that sort. So there is reference in there. It might have been not necessarily where you expected it to be, but I assure you it is in there. And then, John, if you want to speak to the community facilities question.
About the schools?
Yep.
Yeah, and again, it's, we can take a look at that as well. It's, when we get into the other community facilities that are provided for residents, they're not always provided by the city itself, but other jurisdictions. So that's
Right.
the challenge of it.
Right.
But we can go back and take a look at it. You set up a good point, that when raised as an issue, then going back and looking at the goals, we ought to articulate what the city can do to begin to address that declining enrollment, and what the city's role would be in addressing that going forward. So I think we can take a look at that.
Okay, and just because you do have a statement in there, it just was kind of weak.
Right.
I think it was like, we're going to talk to the school district about issues that may be facing them,
Right.
and address them as they come. And it just sounded, well,
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
and it is. It's a fine line to walk between overstepping when you talk about a school or something else, but we can do a better job.
Yeah,
of
yeah,
tightening
okay.
that up.
okay.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, if I can add on to that. In addition, as I mentioned, the school district is one of the jurisdictions that reviews and is required to provide a response on the city's comprehensive plan. So they'll get a chance to look at the section that pertains to them, as well as the overall plan. So we'll look forward to receiving those comments. And in addition, with regard to the declining enrollment, while it may have not been directly correlated back to one another, certainly the goals and objectives in the land use and in the housing chapter that talks about providing life cycle housing so that folks who are ready to move out of their large or moderately sized single family homes and want to move out of them as they become empty nesters, freeing those up for younger families to move in, that certainly will help support younger families coming back and feeding into the schools as well. So we can do more to kind of tie those topics together because it might not be intuitive to the average reader.
I think that would be a great idea. Yeah, yeah. Because as a casual reader, I think they're scared by the statements that are presented right now without the cause and effect. Is it the generational thing with the millennials just passing through and it's a bubble and everybody sees the bubble and now we're through the bubble and everything's going to be rosy again? Or are there deeper problems?
Yeah, and I think that we're through the housing issue of 07, 08, 09. But what came out of it, I think the biggest takeaway from that are cities are beginning to realize, we've got a pretty big age block moving up that pyramid, that cohort pyramid.
Sure.
And there's a lot of people over the next 20 years that are going to be wanting to move out of single-family detached homes into some other product. And a lot of communities across the country lack a sufficient amount of that product to accommodate residents who want to stay in their town as they move out of the single-family detached type of home. And until they can find a product that allows them to stay in the city where they currently live in, they're sort of delaying that move. When they can free up to make that move, then the backfill is the young families that move into those single-family structures. Mm-hmm. And right now, there's a little bit of a bottleneck in that happening.
Other questions on commissioners? Commissioner Higgins.
I have a question coming out of some of the goals and objectives in the housing chapter, chapter 4, and it comes out of some of the experience that I've watched in the past couple of years with regard to rental housing. And although I like a lot of what's in this section on goals, starting on page 68, I just have a question. Can we here at the Planning Commission tonight discuss the possibility of suggesting either some actual language, which I've kind of been playing around with this afternoon, or some concepts that seem to be, from my point of view, worth thinking about putting into the goals and objectives for this particular chapter? I'm not sure if they fit. I think they fit right in Objective 1A, but it may be something that you would want somewhere else in the document and or in a different frame here and then someplace else. I don't really have a firm idea of where things need to be, but I can speak to what I think might be worth talking about. But I wasn't sure what our role here tonight would be in that regard, so I just wanted to throw that out there before I got started.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, certainly if the planning commission has specific direction or ideas about information that they would like to see included in the goals and objectives of any of the chapters, now is the appropriate time to share that with us. Certainly staff can work on this, the specific wordsmithing or location within the document, but now is the time that we would like that type of feedback.
Well then, let me just comment on what I was concerned with and what I'm trying to get at, which is it seems like at the end of number 4 or somewhere else in that same strategies paragraph, it would be important from what I see going on, particularly with regard to rental housing, that existing rental housing that's getting older, or that is changing over from what it has been to something more higher end, that we are losing the opportunity quickly to continue to have available resources for people to stay in those homes, even though we have done what we can with how we are set up to do it. But I think we can look a little bit more aggressively, or maybe that's not the right term, but it's something where we could take the effort and really be more comprehensive in our results. For instance, if somebody from inspections is called over to an apartment to look at something structurally that is not being cared for or has become seriously at risk, and makes a recommendation, that's fine as far as that goes. But often what we have, I'm visiting with a lot of folks around the city who are active on housing issues, and what we have seen recently in the past couple of years is that while that works, it doesn't really get at a much more extensive situation that is coming on fairly quickly. And I don't understand enough about it to be clear, but what I'm trying to get to is the thought that if a apartment complex, and it's usually, we have a lot of bigger ones as well as just small freestanding ones, are going to face, or are facing in their own development and investment strategy, a plan to change over some of those units. They have their own priority about how they want to do it, and it's a private sector, and it's not owned by the city, and the city doesn't have any direct, hammer, except the standards for construction and for water and whatever kinds of regulatory areas we can speak to. So what happens is a problem gets solved on that score, but nobody else in the city staffing is aware that there's more going on than that, unless somebody else comes forward and does it. And it just doesn't seem to make a significant point at which the city and the management of that property can come together and say, hey, the city's got some problems, we see more going on. So how can we either allow or authorize or provide staff and directors of departments the opportunity to do more of that kind of work together so that they can solve problems that are not just one factor, but maybe several. And there's a link into the schools too. I'm aware that in some of the instances where upgrading or changing of the type of rental housing that has been there up to now means that people have to move because the rents are increasing quickly. And as a result, and it came to my mind when you talked about the school problem, children and their families move out in the middle of the year. I mean, it happens randomly throughout the process just to get people to vacate because they want to redo the apartments. So it just seems as if it's an area that's going to continue to bring itself into people's experiences, and I don't know exactly how to fit it into this particular plan, but it seems like we're in need of doing something differently, and I assume that you folks know more than I'm talking about, so you may have some response to what I've just said.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, based on Commissioner Higgins' comments, I think that largely those issues are probably best identified and addressed through the implementation chapter. The housing chapter will have very specific implementation strategies that come out of it. They will be included in the matrix that John spoke to as a part of the implementation chapter. Some of that might include things that the city already does and could continue to do and further enhance, like reaching out to work with property management groups of some of those rental properties, reaching out to homeowners associations based on, different structures of types of housing. And you will find a lot of that information, and we're continuing to refine that based on some Met Council comments in the implementation chapter. So that was one of the things that Met Council commented on, and in fact, I just saw a flurry of emails today back and forth from staff as to how to further refine that and address it. So it is completely on our radar.
Right. And I think that's one of those examples of something that isn't a costly implementation project to undertake. It can be done fairly easily with coordination and effort and a little bit of time. It can have tremendous impact. So exactly what Julie said, we'll make sure that gets put into the implementation chapter specifically.
Okay. I just have one other aspect of this whole topic, which is what people have referred to as protection of tenants. And that is, in some of the instances that we have experienced in the Housing Coalition that I've met with on occasion, a lot of the folks that we have especially in older properties, are people who are often new immigrants or don't speak English that well, have a lot of difficulty understanding how to get help and what kind of help would make a difference, and wondering whether, in terms of the housing office here, there's any resources that we can either have in-house or that we can work with in a partnership kind of fashion or something to try to guide those people before it gets to critical points where they are well beyond what we can do to help them.
Right.
And so I know a little bit enough to be dangerous.
Well, sometimes that's the right amount to know. But you make a good point. Is one of the things, if you go back to the slide on community facilities, that we emphasize was to making sure, and I even said, as your population begins to diversify, both in terms of age or background or whatever, the key to having robust community facilities and services or support is making sure that people can access that. And if they can't access it because of a cultural barrier or a technology barrier or whatever, the city has to figure out a way to get past that barrier so people have access to those goods and services.
Right.
What you raise is a perfect case in point where we need to coordinate not only with maybe a housing authority or different developers or different departments, but also the police. They are often the first ones called to contact with something that may or may not be their purview. Maybe they channel it to the right resource. But it's about a larger city initiative to make sure that all these populations can get past those barriers as they exist right now. So what you stated is exactly what we're trying to do in that section, and we can make the language specifically to sort of the residents of housing in that and those sorts of houses, whether they might be more senior or again can't speak the language, or to know that there's assistance there before they get into a dire situation. I think you're spot on. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner DeSanctis?
Julie, there was a statement in here, I forget what chapter it was under. It was in regards to the movement of the city from turf to native grasses for city properties. And there was a secondary statement or a follow-along statement that talked about encouraging residents to shift away from turf toward native grasses. But then it was left hanging. It wasn't clear to me how that might be implemented on a personal level and a citizen's level.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, if I remember correctly, that's in one of the sustainability callouts in one of the chapters. And the sustainability callouts are intended to be educational as well as informative to the residents. So the connection back that I think you're looking for as to the actionable item, again, may be found in the implementations chapter. The Sustainable Eden Prairie initiative that the city council is directing includes there are 4 tenets to that Sustainable Eden Prairie project, and one of them is native landscaping pollinators. So as a part of that, there will certainly be measurable goals and incentives that are identified and further promoted through the Sustainable Eden Prairie process, rather than having all of that detail provided right here in the comprehensive plan.
And I just want to emphasize that, and it's one thing that I stated before when it comes to water management or stormwater or sustainable best practices. The city has initiatives separate from this that are far more detailed in their areas of expertise or coverage or charge. One of them is the Sustainable Eden Prairie. They get really, no pun intended, into the weeds on stuff like that. And no matter how much we put in here, we'll never be able to give more than that document and that initiative has. So our charge here is to make sure we echo and support those initiatives in here so that there isn't conflict between the two documents.
All right, this is a public hearing. If anyone would like to come up and offer comments, questions about the plan, please do so now. All right, I'm not seeing any. Do I need to close the public hearing?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, any other comments from the commissioners? Now I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
I'm sorry, was it Commissioner Weber? Did you move it? All right, Commissioner Higgins, second. All those to close the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move to recommend approval of the Aspire Eden Prairie 2040 Comprehensive Plan Update based on information contained in the staff report dated September 21st, 2018.
All right.
Second.
A motion from Commissioner Farr, second from Commissioner Kirk. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. The draft is approved for City Council. Congratulations, Julie. Thank you for all the work to you and your staff.
Yes, excellent.
Thank you.
It was a nice process to go through each chapter over the summer, so
Good. I'm glad that it was beneficial.
yeah. It felt like a lot of work for us, so I assume it was 104 times more than that for you, so congrats.
And I'd like to echo Commissioner Farr's comments. I thought it was an excellent document, a lot of good information in there, and well put together.
All right, moving on tonight. Do we have any planners' reports?
No, sir.
Members' reports? Continuing business? New business? I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Commissioner Weber, seconded by Commissioner Kirk. All those to adjourn, say aye.
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 We're adjourned. Thank you.